The following teaching is possible thanks to the friends and partners of Spirit and Truth Fellowship International.
I love riding motorcycles. The other day I realized as I was riding my bike that there's a lot of lessons, parallels if you would, between our spiritual life and motorcycle riding. When I was 15 years old, I rode my very first motorcycle and I was hooked. And shortly thereafter, my dad yielded to my much pressuring and went down with me at 15 and a half and allowed me to purchase my first motorcycle. In California, when you're 15 and a half with a learner's permit, as unbelievable as it is to me today, you're actually allowed to ride a motorcycle. Well, I'm now 60 years old, so for 45 years I've been riding motorcycles. Over that 45 years, I've realized that my level of skill, the smoothness with which I ride, and the safety with which I ride has taken years of developing habits. It's not something that comes quickly. The other day, it was a Sunday evening, and I decided it was time to roll my bike out and head up into the mountains for an hour or two of just smooth sailing. I'm hooked because I love the change in scenery, the feel of the road, the sense of the air movement, the smells, the temperature changes. But as I was riding my bike, here's a couple spiritual lessons that hit me. Number one, as I mentioned, it's been a habit. A lifestyle. It's not something that's happened overnight that's allowed me to ride safely and smoothly. So too, our spiritual life is like that. We don't just start off with spiritual skills that, help us to walk at a level of holiness that we're trying to achieve. Not that any one of us is necessarily ever there, but it's a habit pattern. It's a consistent performance over and over again. Another thing that hit me was my motorcycle's filled with temptations. Temptations primarily to go faster, ride harder, and be more aggressive. There's nothing more fun than the exhilaration of entering a curve and rolling that throttle on. Yet, in the same way that we have to recognize temptation, and then we need to consciously decide not to do it. When I was younger, I would yield to that temptation. The fact of the matter is, there's only two kinds of motorcycle riders. Either those that have been down or those that are gonna go down at some point in their life. Well, when I was younger, I went down on a motorcycle and I learned my lesson. And I've learned spiritual lessons from that. You have got to not yield to that temptation. And that takes habit. You have to consistently perform over and over. The longer you avoid the temptation or not yield to it, the easier it becomes. Even at 60 years old, I still am tempted to ride quickly and aggressively, yet I've developed a habit pattern of not yielding to that temptation. Another lesson that struck me as I got back and I was thinking back over the trip was that just like in our spiritual life, when I'm on the motorcycle, I need to look ahead, far ahead sometimes. And what I'm doing when I'm looking ahead is I have to scan the roadway so that I can identify hazards. I'm keeping my eyes moving, because if I keep my eyes fixed on one spot, that's where I'm going to drive. So too, what are we looking at in our spiritual life? Because what you look at is where you're going to go, and it's where you'll end up being. So I'm constantly scanning the road on my motorcycle. Once I identify a hazard, is it a deer, a pothole, a tight curve? How's the road? What's the pavement like? Is there gravel? I need to identify the nature of the hazard. That's the same thing in our spiritual life. We've constantly got to be on the lookout. What are the things that are coming into my life? What are the kind of friends that I'm hanging out with? Am I yielding to temptations like alcohol, drugs, sex, immorality, other things? What's coming my way? Once you identify, then you need to be able to decide what you're going to do about it. It's one thing to know that something is a problem, but then the wisdom comes in is knowing what to do, in what way, when, how. In other words, doing the right thing at the right time, in the right way, for the right reason. As I ride a motorcycle, sometimes I need to pull on the brake. Other times I need to steer to the left or the right. There's even times where I need to increase and accelerate through the problem. So in the same way, you have to look, you have to scan, you have to identify, and you have to decide. But if all you do is decide, you're going to go down on the bike. Same thing in our spiritual life. You need to follow through. You've got to execute. And that's where sometimes we get in ourselves in problems. We know what we should do, we just don't do it. We don't execute. So can you see some of the parallels that I love riding my motorcycle, and for me, in many ways, it's being able to sit back and to contemplate and to look at things like this. I love it, in fact, when God teaches me spiritual lessons from the simple things in life. So next time you go out there, maybe you too, if you're a motorcycle rider like me, maybe some of these things will touch you in the same way that they have me. But remember that whatever we do, just like riding the motorcycle, it takes years to develop safe practices. And in the same way, in our spiritual life, it's a matter of making it a habit.